And one thing that hurts me most, one of the things that I just can't have enough of it, is when people say they are too young to start saving.
No one is too young to retire. I won't tie retirement to age. I will tie retirement to how much assets do you have to take care of you and your needs in that phase of your life.
Welcome to Zamara Podcast, your gateway to financial literacy and well-being.
I'm your host, Crescencia Ododa, and today I'm joined by Ken Wendo, a seasoned retirement benefits consultant in our consulting and advisory division with over 10 years of experience. And today we'll be tapping into his insights as we look into the common misconceptions, strategies for estimating your retirement needs, and ways to ensure your savings last. So listeners, sit back, listen as we uncover the keys to a financially secure retirement. Ken, just to start us off, what's your understanding of retirement planning?
Thank you for having me, Crescencia. Basically, retirement planning is a deliberate process of organizing your retirement, or a deliberate process of organizing that phase of your life in retirement. And of course, it comes with different ways of planning. Not only do we talk about money. I know most entities in Kenya just focus on money alone.
Yeah.
But we have the financial aspect, as you may be aware. Yeah. We have the psychological aspect of retirement planning. We have the social aspect of retirement planning. And of course, most importantly as well, is that we have the physiological aspect. So in terms of health, how do you prepare or plan that phase of your life?
Okay. As you plan for retirement, are there particular key elements that one should consider?
Of course, when you're planning for retirement, you need to project what you are going to need financially at that phase of your life. And I bet probably we'll be talking about that later. But most importantly is, what are your financial needs? Where are you going to live? The social aspect, as I've said, of retirement planning. Most importantly is, what are you going to do in that time? Because you're going to have a lot of time in your hands. Remember, you are used to working from 8 to 5 every day. And here is a whole day given to you where you're not doing anything. I mean, studies have shown loneliness is so much in retirement. I'm sure you've heard of something called old age divorce. And why does that happen? You have nothing to do. So we encourage retirees or people who are going into that phase of their life to consider planning on what they're going to do. How do you feel your days? Do you want to give back to the society in board meetings? Would you want to be a board member? You know, whatever it is that will appear like a vocation, but really just keeping you busy so that you avoid that potential boredom that you are likely to face in that phase of your life.
One of the things you've mentioned, you're talking about what are your needs in retirement. Does this guide in terms of the goals towards your retirement? And then I'm also assuming if you can recognize the needs right now, meaning you're setting your goals in the future, what are some of the things you can actually do towards that?
As I've said, one is you need to know your financial needs. Two is you need to plan ahead on how you're going to feel the time that you're going to have. Again, remember you've had an entire career of 30 years working, 8 to 5 doing nothing. You need to have a goal on what you're going to do in that part of your life. Financial needs will come in, and most importantly also is the needs for medical. Remember, people assume when you're in retirement you don't need money, but I mean, you will be old, for lack of a better term, and so there's a possibility of old age diseases catching up with you. And so as you're planning, you need to have financial goals. Of course, there are several tools which we'll be talking about later on what are some of the projections you need to have or you can use to know what you need in that phase of your life.
Could you speak slightly about in terms of the risk tolerance as you plan for your retirement? How do you factor this in?
Risk tolerance in terms of investment?
Yes.
Yeah. So personally, I am risk averse. And so, as an example, if I'm to retire in the next 5 or 10 years, I'll make sure that my investments are so much liquid in nature. In the sense that because I'm going to run out of income, such that I'm not going to be on payslip or on payroll or on a pay, I need to ensure that my investments pay me when I'm in that phase of my life. I want to share an unpopular opinion. I do not see the need of bulking up more assets, especially property when you're retiring. I mean, that is what you're supposed to do when you're working, isn't it? Because the typical phase of career growth, accumulation. When you get to the phase of storing it up, then at that phase of your life, you're basically decumulating or consuming what you have created over time. So imagine the risk of you putting money in immovable property in that phase of your life.
Rental properties around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is the typical thing Kenyans invest in. I mean, look, how many Kenyans really invest in the stock exchange, Crescencia?
Hardly.
How many Kenyans buy bonds?
Actually, even before they get to that, most people will only invest in what they kind of understand more. Therefore, this goes all the way to, do they understand how the stock market works? Do they understand how the bond market works? I think it speaks to as well what knowledge is there.
Exactly. You and I, if I ask you right now whether you have a piece of land somewhere, definitely that's an affirmative.
Yes.
Yes. And probably you have what typically Kenyans call plots. It's not plots. What's the name? Rentals. Most people would put money in those things. But for me, it should serve to build up and reserve inflation, in the sense that to cushion your investments not to be hit so hard by inflation. But if you put all your money in that particular basket, what happens when you need cash? How easy is it to liquidate property, for instance? How long will it take you?
Ken, when you speak of that, you are bringing the idea of the role of investment in retirement planning. And probably you can just give an insight. What are some of the investment strategies somebody can take towards their retirement planning?
So let me start first of all by saying, before even the investment strategy, there is a need, or it is important for guys to consider the role of investment in actually retirement planning. Because one, you expect that your investments, the returns you're getting are beating inflation at any one point. Well, we know, for example, in the pension space in Kenya, that has not happened in quite a while. With the way the economy has been behaving and the external factors,
The financial markets
have hit.
But at least they're getting, I think the markets are resilient. Things are
Well, there is the hope that they are turning it back to the positive. But remember, the recent happenings of the finance bill is going to force the government to do what? To borrow locally. And I think today or yesterday in the dailies, the National Treasury through Parliament have increased the debt ceiling to borrow locally. What does that mean? It means then there's not going to be liquidity for investors locally, which increases the interest rates, which will affect both the stock market and also the bond portfolio. So at the end of the day, even as you're considering your investments, as I was saying, we need to look at the role of investments in retirement planning. What do you consider? One, time. How much time do you have? Two, how much can you actually put aside? And finally, three is the rate of return. So if you're going to put money in an investment, and this, of course, should speak to all pension schemes or every investment that is pension-oriented in Kenya, how can we think of diversifying our portfolio to actually get reasonable returns? I know there is this conversation about risk, return, and all that.
Actually, I think it's important. Should we factor in as well the risk tolerance for the individuals?
Absolutely. An older person, risk tolerance ideally should be low, because they are about to get to that phase of their life of retirement. And so even if they are putting their investments, most of them will not consider stocks. Yeah. They would consider bonds, they will consider cash deposits and so on and so forth, because they have a shorter time. If you are young, exactly. Yeah. The younger you are, the longer the investment horizon. And so you can actually take more risks, benefit from compound interest, risk adjustments, and so on and so forth. But if you're just impending retirement, you may not really want to go into putting investments or putting your money in assets that you're not sure of the impending future, or rather immediate future returns.
Yeah, absolutely. Oftentimes, retirement seems such a distant discussion that is not so relevant to start the conversation at an early age. I don't know what you feel in terms of how soon should one start their savings towards retirement?
My take has always been immediately you're employed, you should start planning for your retirement.
Or starting a business as well. I see most of this generation is not really keen on employment.
Well, the Gen Zs, okay, now there is a Gen Z conversation, but the younger people currently are not considering employment. Either way, they'll have to get to that phase of their life when they are not going to be actively involved in their business or employed. Exactly. So they should still plan. Regardless of whether you're a business person or you are employed, you still need to plan for your retirement. And so for me, the earlier the better. Now, that does not make you a failure if you start late. You still have time. The only challenge or the only issue you'll have is that if it is savings, you probably need to save more. A younger person can save 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 for a longer period of time because they have the advantage of time. But if you are 50, 60, I mean, you don't have so much time.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you start, the earlier you start, the better, because you've mentioned things to do, especially getting the benefit of the compound interest working for you, then as well the ability to diversify the investments as you go along. Short of that, if you start at a later age, most likely you'll probably have to increase the duration that you'll continue working, just to at least to ensure you get to the point where you wanted to be at on retirement. And alternatively as well, or rather in addition, you will have to look at what is your investment strategy. You'll have to get into investment assets that will actually be of higher return to enable you reach your destination in the shorter period that you have.
True. But for someone that is employed, do you have control of when you retire? Partially you do. But when you get to that age that you must go, you can't extend.
There's hardly anything you
There's
can
hardly
do.
anything.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're already tired after all.
You're tired. Those in public service, the president announced the other day, anyone who is 60 and above is not going to be given an extension of contract. And so what you can do at that point in time before, of course, you retire is just to look at the quantity or the quantum of your savings. You cannot extend. Alternatively is if you're leaving service, you do not access your benefits at the time, hopefully that you have other means of survival and come and access those benefits later with the hope that the markets will do very well and then you will benefit from the investment returns over the difference of period.
Sometimes when you start your journey towards retirement, and as you've rightly put it, when you start, you better have a goal, you better have a strategy, you better know for how long you're going to be in it, what you want to achieve, what's the amount of money you're looking into towards your retirement and all that. Is there room for adjustment as you go along? And what are some of the things you're supposed to look into?
By the way, if there's anything that is constant in this life, is change. And so it can come at any one point. And over and above that, you must be able to be adaptable to anything that comes our way. And yes, of course, you will be able or you can be in a position to adjust your plans. Let me give you a scenario. You expected to retire at 60, Crescencia.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it so happens that you have been forced to go into retirement because of ill health.
At an earlier age than the 60.
At an earlier age than the 60.
Mm-hmm.
Won't you be forced to adjust your plans?
Yeah, definitely.
At that time? You may not have saved enough. That may actually cause you to even look at your current living standards. You may have to change how you live. You may have to look at your
As
expenses.
you downgrade it now.
Exactly.
Because, yeah.
Exactly, because you have been forced into a phase of life that you were not initially exactly prepared for. That speaks to, and that brings me to this other conversation I'm hoping we'll be having it very soon on now financial planning as well, is how many people really have an emergency fund? Ideally, you should not look for your pension money when you are found in a situation of loss of job or early retirement or whatever it is, redundancy. You should be able to continue with your life, albeit the same standards, but don't touch your retirement money. And that
Let me even just add to that.
Yeah.
I think even over and above the emergency fund and all that, I think this is even where insurance comes to play as well. This is where you can actually support your financial planning if you're protecting unforeseen situations as well. God forbid, in case of critical illness, do you have a critical illness cover that can take care of that, as opposed to you withdrawing what you had saved for when you totally are not in a position to work?
True.
Yeah.
Actually, insurance is all about risk management and risk planning. And so everyone should be in a position to actually take relevant insurances to cater for any unforeseen risks. For example, if you get in an accident, the insurance cover for your car should be able to take you back to where you are.
Yeah.
And that is how insurance works. Now, what is the penetration rate for insurance in Kenya? It's quite low. It's really, really low. Now, tell me how many people are in a position to be taken back by insurance if anything happens. If, God forbid, you have a business and it raised down by a fire and you have not taken insurance, that speaks to the unforeseen circumstances. Now, there is, of course, an issue with insurance penetration, a discussion for another day, but it is something that I think as a country we need to be sensitizing our countrymen on. It cannot be ignored. It should be able to help anyone who, in the event they find themselves in an unforeseen circumstance, to take them back to where they were.
Ken, even as we park the issue of insurance for a further discussion, hopefully on another day, this brings to mind, we see most of the expenses for retirees go into healthcare. And we're in a situation where you'll be out of work. Oftentimes, most people enjoy health cover based or thanks to their employers. What are some of the things a retiree can actually do towards that?
So the Retirement Benefits Authority, first of all, a couple of years ago, I think through Dr. Odundo, came up with the Post-Retirement Medical Fund Currently, we even have the post-retirement medical fund rules, which have since been gazetted, or regulations rather. So the post-retirement medical fund is simply an arrangement where you can put money aside over your working life to be able to cater for your premiums in retirement or for your medical cover in retirement. Works in different ways, different formats. There is one which you contribute to a fund, and that fund then is converted into a medical cover for you, either within the fund in which you are saving, right? If it's a pension scheme, for example, let's say XYZ pension scheme, they have a sub-fund which is taking care of purely
The
retirement,
medical aspect.
the medical aspect. And so that means then they'll be meeting the cost of any retiree or any person who is a member from the fund. The other alternative is you save up to a certain target. Usually, we call it target-based savings. Let's say you want, you're targeting 5 million in terms of premium, lump sum premium. That should be able to give you a cover of 20 million in terms of inpatient, and let's say 300,000 outpatient. Then once you get the target of 5 million to the target of 5 million and you get to retirement, you transfer that fund to a post-retirement medical fund, lump sum, and you're not going to add any coin on it, which takes care of your medical needs in retirement. And I think a very good example is the former CEO of RBA, Dr. Odundo, who has in public given his story and testimony on how that fund has actually helped him. I think it is one, I don't know which one he's in, but there's one he's been able to go to for surgery in several places, taking care of. Yes, it's in the public domain. And so it's not a story. It really happens. And so I would
something that we can all look into
Yes.
and say if this is actually, and it was so nice of him then to be leading from the front.
Exactly.
If as coming up with the regulations and all that.
Exactly. And if you listen to him, he says one of the things that we need in retirement, according to his experience so far, is not property. The most important thing for him is medical care.
Yeah.
Then he seconds that with liquidity. Then others follow, family and so on and so forth. Then he says you shouldn't be in debt and stuff like that. But that tells you the importance of medical care in retirement. Remember, when you're getting old, you are susceptible to old age diseases, and subsequently premiums are very, very high and expensive. And so I would encourage members due to retire, those who are even much younger, because they have an advantage again because of time, they can start saving for their post-retirement medical now. But it is something that we all need to consider, because as long as you are given the opportunity to live for long, let's say 100, those diseases or old age conditions will catch up.
I think just in addition, I think members are also allowed to transfer up to 10% towards a post-retirement medical fund if they didn't get the opportunity to save earlier, which I think is a good
I agree
thing.
completely. And my issue with that transfer is how much can you really transfer? Because, I mean, when you're told you need to save up to 5 million and you have the total 5 million as your retirement pot, so you can only really transfer how much? 500,000? So how much is that really going to take care of you?
You can hardly do much.
That could be premium for only 2 years.
Yes, exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
So again, going back to the need to save early, it is painless. It is over time. You get used to that deduction as opposed to that one-off lump sum, which may not even be enough.
And then you enjoy cover for the rest of your life. One of the things that also I think the regulations talk of is that once the fund reaches a particular threshold, they're allowed to invest separately. And I think that's to counter medical inflation and all that. Leave alone on the medical inflation, I just want you to speak on inflation on your retirement benefits and how can one counter that?
Crescencia, let me ask you, how much was bread 10 years ago?
Bread 10 years ago.
You wouldn't know, but basically it's not the price now.
Exactly.
Years back, people will tell you they were buying salt for cents.
Something
for
a
the
currency
longest,
that is no longer in use.
For the longest time, salt was 5 shillings. How much is salt now?
I think it's like 20. Or is it,
exactly.
Was it 50?
Salt of all things.
Yes.
Yeah. So inflation basically is going to catch up.
Yeah, true.
With the savings. And if your investments are not beating inflation,
it's a zero-sum game.
It's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
You'd rather have put that money under a mattress or something
and just it in your hand
and collect it after some time. And so then how can I say beat inflation for lack of a better term? Diversify your portfolio. Consider diversification of portfolio. If you have liquidity enough, one of the investments that hardly is affected by inflation is property. What would you consider in terms of property? I'm not saying property at the point of retirement. I'm saying acquisition of property at an earlier age.
Yeah.
Right? So that by the time you're getting to retirement, you have actually increased the value of that property over time. Then if you can dispose it and transfer that particular investment into an annuity or an income drawdown, whatever it is that then pays you your monthly pay for retirement, right? And so let me summarize that. One, diversification of your investment portfolio. Two, consider assets that are rarely affected by inflation, and a typical one is property.
Ken, you've spoken of a period when you were young, and I don't know if your parents had this perception that let me educate Ken to this level, then thereafter, once I've retired, Ken will be my retirement solution
Plan.
I want to speak on the common misconceptions we have on retirement. What are some that you can probably share with our listeners today?
First of all, thank you. My parents took me to school very well, but I don't think they were planning that I'm going to be their retirement, although I do as much as I can to be able to take care of them. But that is the most unfortunate thing most millennials or older or boomers, whatever it is, have, that their younger or their children are going to take care of them.
And sometimes they have that in mind and they say, let's give birth to as many so that
exactly
when they come together,
yes,
they will be able to...
Yes, they have the resources to take care of us.
The collective responsibility.
It's not happening, my friend. It's not happening.
True.
Why is that the case? Because society is changing.
Yeah. And actually, even before you get to that, people can hardly take care of themselves.
Exactly.
These children can hardly take care of themselves.
Parents are actually taking care of their working children.
Yeah.
I was conducting a training a few days ago, actually last week, for one of my clients. And when I asked them, how many of you are on your children's payroll? None lifted up their hands. How many of you, the second question was, how many of you have working children? Quite a number lifted up their hands. Mm-hmm. The third question was, how many of you support your working children? All of them.
Oh my goodness.
Were supporting their working children.
Oh my goodness.
And so it is not their fault of the
like
kids.
The reality
it is
across, in as much as it could have been a fraction of a particular members.
Yeah.
Represents almost what is happening.
It is the reality that parents are taking care of working children. And I don't blame those children. It's because of how the economy is structured.
Yeah.
How many well-paying jobs are actually out there?
Very few.
Exactly.
Very few.
Look at, okay.
And even before you get to that job, how many years have you tarmacked? How many years have you been waiting for it?
Exactly. So they're actually supporting them. So that is the one misconception that people need to get out completely and forget about it. No one is coming to rescue you in your retirement. Plan yourself.
Yeah.
Plan yourself. Do your math right. Know where you're going to stay. I tell people part of retirement planning is family planning. Have these people as early as possible.
Oh, really? I've never heard of that before.
Yes.
So that by the time you are 50, you're no longer paying
if you are paying CBC at 50 and you are retiring in 10 years at 60, assuming you're in public service, goodness. How are you going to survive? How are you going to pay university fee for that child?
Not possible.
Unless you're so wealthy and you have invested well, way before you go to that age. How many people in Kenya do that?
A very small fraction as well, yeah.
Very, very few people do that. So do this business as early as possible so that by the time you are retiring, now you're done with them. Again, I will give you the story of my old man. I happen to be the last born. My dad turned 70 the other day. So this man finished with us a long time ago. And we are 5 of us. My dad had our firstborn when he was 23. Yes. So he's done. The old man is retiring gracefully. He's a typical, and I tell people this story whenever I talk to them. For me, he's a typical good retiree because he finished this business.
Setting an example for you.
I hope I'll be able to meet that. Finished this business a long time ago. And I mean, they are gone. They are taking care of themselves. They are adults. You basically do not have day-to-day needs that you need to meet that are expensive.
Yeah. Actually, it also helps them in terms of their retirement planning. They can expect what expenses they'll be having. One of them, at least, they're already sure they don't have school fees on the table.
Yes.
They don't have, in terms of, say, for example, food and all that. It's not for a larger number of people.
Exactly.
But just maybe for him and the wife. And
a worker there, a driver. The other misconception is that people assume you will not need a lot of money.
When we underestimate our retirement expenses.
Exactly. You and I work in this space. How many people do we need or do we meet in retirement and we have seen the quantum of money they have? How many people have actually retired and come back to ask for the shortfall
The shortfall interest, yes.
Yeah.
Funny enough, they remember it.
Exactly. Yeah, and during their work life, they couldn't even remember the pension statement.
The good thing is that when they come for the shortfall, sobriety also lands on them. They now make the right decision with the
It
shortfall.
is a good thing, but
something
for
they
me,
would have probably done with the main amount,
isn't that a bit too late?
unfortunately. But
Yeah.
at least they still get to do something about it.
The other one is the taxation bit. Some people assume they'll not pay tax. Well, if you're 65 and above,
There's no
you
tax
won't
on
pay
your
tax.
funds,
And
yeah.
maybe next time we need to talk about some of those tax planning measures, for retirement people or for retirement population. The other misconception is that I'll be taxed at 30%, not necessarily. So you'll be taxed on a graduated scale depending on where you fall. If you're below the age of 50 or if you're above the age of 50, the tax brackets will apply depending on your age and depending on other factors as well.
And one thing that hurts me most, one of the things that I just can't have enough of it, is when people say they are too young to start saving. And I think that's one, for me, it's the bedrock of all the misconceptions, whereby they think I'll start saving when I'm in my, 40 years? As long as they think, and then they also have the perception that I'm in the gig economy, I'm not going to retire and all that.
That
We
you will
speak to
invest
that
in
as well.
cryptocurrency and all that
Yes.
stuff. My friend,
Yes.
you have seen what crypto has done to a very good population. No one is too young to retire. And by the way, for me, retirement is a choice. Whether you will be forced by your age or whether you will make a conscious decision to retire because of what you have, you can make that call.
Yeah.
And so some people retire way early because they feel they have sufficiently been able to save enough to take care of them, while others decide to go over and above the normal typical 60 years.
Yeah.
And so for me, I won't tie retirement to age. I will tie retirement to how much assets do you have to take care of you and your needs in that phase of your life.
I think that is a great mind shift that we all need to adopt, whereby we are not tying retirement to age, but to what can actually fund our lifestyle
Exactly.
and our retirement. That brings to mind, I just want to speak to this, that whether you are starting your career, whether you are starting your business, or even when you are nearing retirement age, for one, it's never too early to plan for it. It's never either too late for you to do something about it.
Exactly.
I just want to ask Wendell, what is your parting shot on this?
Everyone needs to plan for retirement. It will come, whether we like it or not. Whether you will be forced out, it will come. Whether you will get to the prescribed retirement age, it will have come. Whether it will be as a result of ill health, it will come. At some point, we have to go through that phase of our life as long as we're alive. And so it is imperative that we plan for that phase, whether we like it or not. Yeah.
Therefore, it's actually important we plan for it. The true test of it will actually come to be seen at the point of retirement. Were you really planning or misplanning for your retirement? Thank you, Ken Wendell, for taking your time to give us your insights on this. I want to believe that we have uncovered and unlocked keys for our listeners to a financially secure retirement.
Thank you.